They never chase you when you're eager. They never see your value when you're available. But the second you stop reaching, the silence becomes deafening. People don't respond to kindness the way we were told they would. They don't gather around generosity like bees to nectar. No, they wait, they circle, they test for weakness, approval, affection, validation. You show even a crack of craving, and suddenly the air grows thick with vultures. They can smell it, your need, like blood in the water. And when they do, they feed, not on your joy, on your longing, on the empty space inside you that once whispered, "Please like me." But then something shifts, not with drama, not with fire, just a quiet realization that you're done. Done dancing for claps that never come, done molding your truth to fit someone else's comfort, done trading your spine for a seat at their table. And in that silence, that glorious still moment where your soul breathes without begging, you become untouchable. They notice. Not because you made a scene, but because you didn't. Your absence becomes the loudest thing in the room. They lean in, hoping to hear the song you used to sing just for them. But the stage is empty, the mic is off, the lights are down. You've exited, and what's left behind? A legend. Not because you were adored, because you disappeared without explanation. You see, people don't admire your presence until it's no longer guaranteed. They don't value your voice until it stops filling the silence. They don't respect your boundaries until they run headfirst into them. You could have stayed, played the part, smiled when it hurt, laughed when you wanted to scream, given and given and given, until there was nothing left but a hollow shell of someone who once believed in the magic of being enough. But you didn't. You walked. And in doing so, you reclaimed something most people never touch in their lifetime. Power born from detachment. Not bitterness, not rage. Just a sacred distance. A space where your worth isn't measured by anyone's reaction to it. They say you've changed, that you've grown cold, that you don't care like you used to. And they're right, because caring for them was killing you. Needing them was eating you alive. And loving them meant abandoning yourself. So now you sit in silence and it doesn't feel like loneliness. It feels like home. Now you move through the world, not asking, "Will they like me?" but asking, "Do I like this version of me?" That is the pivot. That is the threshold between who you were and who you're becoming. When you no longer need to be needed, the world flips upside down. And suddenly, everybody wants you. Not because you're performing, but because you're no longer available for consumption. Because you're no longer soft enough to be chewed up and spit out at their convenience. You've become the fire they want to warm themselves by, but never own. The storm they fear and admire in equal measure. And the most terrifying part for them? They can't figure out how to pull you back. Because they never understood the secret. You were never theirs to hold. They only ever borrowed your light, and now you've taken it back. There comes a moment, subtle but irreversible, when you realize they never loved you. They loved what you gave. Your warmth, your attention, your yes. And every time you hesitated, every time you paused to consider yourself, their affection shifted. Their smile dimmed, their tone turned sharp. Because you weren't being useful anymore. See, they don't mourn the loss of you. They mourn the loss of access, the access to your time, your empathy, your willingness to shrink so they could stand taller. But something broke, not in a violent crash, but a quiet click in your soul, a lock turning in the door, and just like that, you stopped answering. They felt it, and now they chase. But they're not chasing love, they're chasing control, because your distance reminds them that they never had power, only permission. and that permission has been revoked. You no longer apologize for needing space. You no longer flinch when they disapprove. You no longer explain every breath you take. And in that stillness, you begin to see clearly for the first time. All those times you bent over backwards, they never noticed. All those times you kept silent just to keep the peace, they called it your nature, not your sacrifice. All those wounds you hid behind your smile, they mistook it for strength, never once wondering what it cost. But not anymore. Now you let the silence speak. You let the unanswered messages hang like unanswered prayers. You let your absence say what your presence no longer will. Because now you're protecting something sacred, something new, your energy, your peace, your sovereignty. And suddenly their words, once weapons, feel dull. You've changed. Yes, you don't care anymore. No, I just don't care about pleasing you. You're distant. No, I'm free. They try to pull you back into the role you used to play, the agreeable one, the soft one, the predictable one. But that version of you is gone. Not in hiding, not sleeping. Dead. And in its place stands someone they don't recognize, someone who says no, without guilt, someone who walks away without explanation, someone who chooses peace over people, truth over tolerance, solitude over performance. It terrifies them, because deep down they know they were never strong enough to make that choice, to walk away from the stage, to silence the applause, to face the mirror and say, "This version of me deserves more." But you did. You faced that mirror. You didn't just walk away from people. You walked away from the version of yourself who begged to be seen. You buried the hunger for approval. You exiled the need to be chosen. And in that sacred burial ground, something else grew, self-respect. Now you walk like someone with nothing to prove. Now you speak only when the truth is heavy enough to require your voice. Now you give, but never from emptiness. You love, but never at the cost of your spine. This they don't understand. They confuse your stillness for arrogance, your boundaries for cruelty, your silence for emptiness. But they don't see the fullness inside you, the garden you've built where no one else's weeds can grow. They don't see the nights you spent teaching yourself how to be your own comfort, the battles you fought alone to reclaim your own reflection. They just see the fortress, not the war that built it. And now they knock at gates they never helped build. They offer apologies dipped in manipulation, promises wrapped in guilt. But you've tasted your own power, and now you hunger for nothing they can offer. They say you're cold, but cold is just what it feels like when someone stops burning themselves to keep others warm. There is one test that almost always reveals the presence of a soulless being, not through confrontation or accusation, but through silence, stillness, that sacred heavy space where nothing needs to be said and everything is felt. Try this. Sit with them. Don't speak. Don't explain. Don't distract. Just be still. And then observe. Do they fidget? Do they rush to fill the silence with meaningless words or forced laughter? Do they get angry that you're no longer performing? Because here's the truth. They'll never say out loud. Most people are terrified of stillness, because in the absence of the distraction, the truth surfaces. And the truth is, they were never really connected to you. They were connected to what you did for them, how you made them feel about themselves, how your energy was a mirror for their insecurities to bounce off of and feel taller. But in the stillness, that mirror cracks. And when they look at you now, they only see themselves. That's why they recoil. That's why they accuse you of being too much or not enough. Because stillness doesn't flatter them anymore. It confronts them. You no longer bend. You no longer smile just to make others comfortable. You no longer laugh when something isn't funny. You no longer translate your truth into bite-sized pieces just to be palatable. And that scares them. Because now you speak a language they don't understand. Sovereignty. You carry a presence that doesn't shrink in the face of rejection. A presence that says, "You don't have to like me, I do." This new you, you're not angry, you're not bitter. You're refined. Refined by pain, by loss, by solitude. Yes, but also by clarity. Clarity of what you are and what you'll never be again. You'll never again be the person who begs to be seen, who molds themselves into whatever shape makes them less threatening, who bleeds quietly, hoping someone might notice. Now your silence is loud, your stillness is commanding. Your eyes no longer plead, they simply see, and they see everything. The manipulation behind the compliments, the guilt buried in their apologies, the hunger behind their sudden interest. They don't miss you, they miss having access to the parts of you they could feed off of. But you've closed the gates, and what's behind them is no longer desperation or loneliness. It's peace, not a fragile, fleeting peace, but a peace that stands its ground, that guards itself, that doesn't explain why the drawbridge stays up. Because let's be honest, what did explaining ever get you? Understanding. No, just more ways for them to twist your words. So now you say nothing. You just withdraw. You just watch. You just listen as they panic, as they spiral, as they try to interpret your silence like it's a code to be cracked. But it's not a code, it's a boundary. A simple message written in invisible ink. Not everyone gets access. And that's what rattles them the most. That access is no longer earned by flattery or guilt trips or nostalgia. It's earned through consistency, respect, and reciprocity. They won't meet those requirements, so they call you cold. They say you're guarded, distant, impossible to read. But that's only because they're no longer holding the script to your story. You burned it, and rewrote the whole narrative with your name in bold on every page. Now they sit in the audience, unsure of the plot, trying to guess what happens next, trying to predict your next line. But you don't play predictable roles anymore. You are no longer the actor. You are the director. You are no longer in the play. You are the one holding the curtain, and if they want to see the next act, they'll have to earn a seat. They thought the game was still in play, that if they ignored you long enough, you'd crawl back, that if they withheld love, you'd earn merit harder, that if they left you standing in the cold, you'd come knocking, begging for warmth. But you didn't. You built a fire of your own. And when they finally turned around to look, expecting you to still be there, they found only ashes. The outline of someone who once waited for their crumbs, now vanished into sovereignty. That's what truly haunts them. Not your anger, not your silence, but your ease. The ease with which you say no, the ease with which you disappear, the ease with which you stopped bleeding for them and started breathing for yourself. Because now, you don't ask for a seat at the table. You build your own. One seat. No guests. And while they tell others how you've changed, how you're acting too good, you're somewhere between peace and purpose, untouched, unbothered, and unavailable. That's the new power, being unavailable, not as a game, not as punishment, but as protection. You've seen what happens when you let too many hands hold your heart. They squeeze until it forgets its own rhythm. They reshape it, mold it, dilute it, until it's barely recognizable as yours. So you pulled it back. Now you guard your time like treasure, your energy like currency, your presence like royalty. And suddenly the ones who once laughed at your solitude, now they envy it. Because solitude gave you something they never had, clarity. It stripped the noise. It peeled back the masks. It showed you who clapped when you won and who stayed quiet when you bled. And you never forgot. You didn't get cold. You got precise. You learned to give only to those who give back, not in grand gestures, but in genuine presence. That's the irony they'll never admit. They say you're distant, but you're actually closer to yourself than you've ever been. Your solitude isn't a punishment, it's a reward. It's what happens when you pass the final test, the one where you no longer need to be needed. That's the test they fail every time. They still seek applause, still chase likes, still measure their worth by how many hands clap when they walk in a room. But you walk into empty rooms and feel full. You speak less and say more. You show up rarely, and yet your presence echoes louder than their daily noise. They still don't understand that silence is not your absence. It's your signature. They can't grasp that mystery is not a mask, it's a shield. That keeping your plans private is not secrecy, it's sovereignty. Because what they call withholding, you know as self-preservation. And the people who truly see you don't need explanations. They don't panic in your silence. They don't flinch when you go quiet. They trust your stillness because they know what lives behind it: integrity. So now, when you meet someone new, you don't ask, "Will they love me?" You ask, "Can they handle my stillness? Can they respect the parts of me they can't access? Can they sit in the silence and not panic?" Because that's the real test, not who shows up when you shine, but who stays when you pause, who listens when you go quiet, who respects the fortress without needing to be let in. And most, they fail. Not because they're bad, but because they were never taught that real connection doesn't come from closeness, it comes from respect. Now you don't perform, you don't audition, you don't bleed on demand, you exist. And those who can't honor that, fade, fall, fail. And that right there is your crown. Not one built on applause, but on the silence that followed your unapologetic becoming. You didn't need a crown to become royalty. You didn't need applause to feel valuable. You didn't need their love to feel whole. Because somewhere in the deep, in the quietest place of your soul, you discovered a secret most never find. The empire you were building was never out there. It was always within. And now, when they speak your name, it comes with hesitation. They're careful. They speak softer. They don't know what version of you they might awaken. Is it the one who gave everything and asked for nothing? The one they used to control with silence, with shame, with scarcity? Or is it the version that now stands tall, back unbent, voice steady, eyes clear? The version that no longer needs but simply is. You've become something they didn't anticipate. Unshakable, not loud, not defensive, just quietly, immovable. The type of presence that shifts a room without saying a word. The kind of spirit that makes others question themselves because you no longer give them access to question you. They call you intimidating, but it's not because you're harsh. It's because you're whole. And wholeness in a world built on broken dependencies is a threat. You walk differently now, not to impress, but because you finally stopped dragging the weight of everyone else's expectations. You no longer flinch at disapproval. You no longer soften truth to be digestible. You no longer shrink to be digestible. Let them say you've changed. You have. Let them say you're distant. You are from who you used to be. The version of you that tolerated everything in hopes of being loved is gone. And in their place stands a soul who knows that real love doesn't come from pleasing others. It comes from never betraying yourself again. You've outgrown apologies for being whole. You've outgrown tables where you must explain your worth. You've outgrown every cage built from sweet words and subtle control. Now, you are the one who decides who gets close. who earns your softness, who receives your loyalty, and it is earned, not demanded. This is your final act of rebellion. You belong to no one, and because of that, everyone wants you. They don't want you because of what you offer. They want you because of what you've reclaimed. Your power, your stillness, your unbothered gaze that no longer seeks confirmation. You are the lesson they'll never admit they needed, the echo of strength they try to mimic but cannot embody. The storm they long to watch but will never survive standing in. Let them call you cruel. Let them label you unreachable, because those who see your wholeness as cruelty were only ever attached to your brokenness. You don't perform anymore. You don't audition for love. You don't explain your silence, your standards, or your strength. You simply exist on your own terms. And in that refusal to be anyone's puppet, you become the one story they can't rewrite, the one soul they can't possess, the one chapter they can't skim through and forget. You are not the villain in their fairy tale. You're the author of your own. And while they gather in circles, dissecting your distance, mourning the version of you they once had easy access to, you are busy crafting something sacred, not revenge, not rage, not even regret, but a life that honors the battles you survived, a life that doesn't apologize for putting peace above performance, a life that doesn't trade its throne for fleeting affection. So let them knock. Let them wonder. Let them gossip. Because you no longer open your doors out of guilt. You open them by choice. And rarely, very rarely, this is your sovereignty, your empire. Not marked by noise, but by quiet mastery, the kind that can't be taken, only built. One truth, one boundary, one breath at a time. And that is what they'll never understand. You don't need them. And that's exactly why they'll never stop needing you.